to look like a proper Muslim woman or whatever the heck it is, I don't know. I got tired of wearing the hat, and I thought, well, I better wear this. This video is about Calvin's poison. And it's kind of serious. I was kind of thrown for a loop when I found out, what Calvin's attitude was when he died. And my first thought was, golly, anybody could be like that. He was sick for a long time. And, going to Calvin College and reading his, when he gives his last will and testament, I put the links in the hijab hijinks video. It was pretty depressing. And then reading what he had to say, his constant anti-Semitism in his commentary on Daniel 9, that was really depressing, because when we have to talk against some position or somebody espousing a certain sect or whatever, that's one thing, that's impersonal really. But when you get down to where the person lives, you can't help but think, well, gee, I could have been like that. There but for the grace of God go I, okay? So I've kind of been in a funk for the last 2 weeks. Trying to figure out, well, how was it that, okay, he was anti-Semitic, which means he wasn't growing spiritually, okay? And people try to excuse that by saying, well, the times he lived in. I'm sorry, if you got the Bible in you, the times you live in aren't supposed to influence you. But still, given his anti-Semitism, that would have held him back from understanding Bible. It does to anybody. But for 30 years? He was 20, I gotta go into this. Part of it's gonna blither a little bit because I'm trying to discharge. He was in his 20s when he wrote the Institutes, okay? It's understandable that somebody in his 20s would have, not have his theological act together. And if anything, you have to say that for a young man in his 20s in those days, that was a pretty remarkable thing he did, was to write the Institutes, okay? And the other thing about him is that, I don't know, French isn't really all that hard to read if you've had any Latin, but if you read his letters to the French king, it's just gorgeous, okay? That's how I fell in love with Calvin initially, by reading those letters, okay, in French, because his passion and his verve are so great. But in your 20s, you make mistakes in theology. You get all hyper and all that other good stuff. So I can understand why the Institutes, have problems, theological problems in them, and he got stuff wrong. I don't have a problem with that. What I don't understand is by the time he's 50, because he kept rewriting, he kept editing the Institutes, why didn't he fix his problems? And the answer is he stayed anti-Semitic, and he stayed an addict of Augustine. That's really what's wrong with what Calvin did, is that he was completely addicted to Augustine. Augustine was an anti-Semitic also. Augustine was a real jerk. Okay, even his biographers admit that he was a jerk. He was not a good student. He didn't want to study the Hebrew and Greek much. He wanted to stick just to the Latin Bible. He argued with Jerome when Jerome wanted to retranslate the Latin Bible because of all the errors that were in the old Latin. And they got letters going back and forth, which you can read at newadvent.org, which is a Catholic website. They preserve the letters. Catholics are real good about preserving manuscripts. That's one of their big, one of their many big advantages. And so, you get a flavor of what Augustine was like. And he was a jerk. Just a thoroughgoing jerk, full of bombast. He was constantly undercutting Jerome. Jerome had to write him letters saying, why are you talking behind my back? Augustine was just a self-aggrandizing jerk. And his treatise on the will, okay, which I have a hardback copy of, I should go get it. It's a thin thing, okay? It's just full of bombast. He was just in love with the sound of his own voice, okay? Calvin, unfortunately, in his 20s, you can understand it, was just in love with Augustine. And instead of going back to the Bible and checking the Bible versus what Augustine said, Calvin just repeated it, parroted Augustine lock, stock, and barrel. So the first of the poisons of Calvin are basically the poisons of the Church Fathers. The Church Fathers, I haven't found one of them yet that doesn't make me throw up. They were so full of themselves, they were so anti-Semitic, they were so full of bombast, and they take 90,000 words to say something simple. Okay? And he was in love with those people, and if you're in your 20s and you're told that these are your fathers, you're going to respect them and idolize them, okay? But by the time you're 50, you shouldn't. So the first of his poisons is he carried forward the poisons of the Church Fathers into the Institutes. And there were two really big poisons in the Church Fathers that last to this day. Well, three big poisons. The first big poison is anti-Semitism. There's just no doubt about that. And all you have to do is read Calvin's commentary on Daniel 9. Search on the word Jews, rabbis, and Barbanel, and you'll see it. Search also on the words constant shower, where he ascribes to God Calvin's own anti-Semitism and wanting to wipe out the Jews. It's really awful. So that's the first poison. And he inherited that by swallowing lock, stock, and barrel the writings of the Church Fathers. Okay? And that cost Calvin a lot. And people who go into Calvinism who don't recognize the cost of that are really in a lot of doo-doo. Preterism is an anti-Semitic doctrine. That's its foundation. His replacement theology, which Calvin bought lock, stock, and barrel. And that was inherited from the Church Fathers, especially from Augustine. Augustine allegorized away Revelation. Okay? And this is kind of commonly known, so you can check it. You don't have to take my word for it. In fact, I expect you to test everything I say. That's the first poison. The second poison is that, like Augustine, Calvin thought that free will was lost at the fall. Now that's a huge poison too, because that basically says that God's incompetent. That God couldn't design the soul in the first place to create inviolable free will so that man would be responsible for his own decisions. And Augustine really fomented that idea. I mean, he wasn't the first guy who did it, but he was a real big contributor to it by his treatise on the will. He basically made a very bad conclusion that you can read about if you read his treatise. I'll see if I can find a link to it online. It probably is one on earlychristianwritings.com. Basically what he contends in there is that if man can make a good choice, then man is good. He was trying to account for why evil came into the world. And he was so full of bombast, setting up a straw man arguer and all that. It's just such a disgusting book. That he doesn't pay very close attention to how by saying that because man can make a good choice, man is good, that he's undercutting God. Alright? So what Augustine has to do is he has to take away free will as a result of the fall, which Calvin just fell for that. Calvin didn't even pay any attention to the falseness of that premise. See, if God makes you have to believe in him to be saved, then that means you have free will. That means that God created you with free will, and therefore you're responsible for how you use it. That does not mean that there's any merit in your using it pro-God. I can vote for God till I'm blue in the face, and that doesn't mean any merit for me at all. I have free will. I'm responsible for my free will. Whatever decision I make, the merit is in the object, not in me. If I drink gasoline, I made the decision to drink it, but the actual work is being done by the gasoline on me. You see what I'm saying? If I eat food, it's the food acting on me that's the merit. My eating it is no merit to me. It's the food that's got the merit, or the demerit, depending on what kind of food it is. The same thing for believing in Christ. It's the object of what I believe is going to act on me. And its merit or its demerit is where the merit issue is, not in my choosing it. I mean, to say that there's merit in your believing or choosing is like saying that if you go out and buy Nike basketball shoes, you're going to be able to play basketball as good as Michael Jordan. Okay? That's the fallacy of this idea that if you choose good, then you are good. No, if I choose good, that means the object is good, assuming that, the choice that I made was accurate. And if the object really isn't good, okay, well then I'm still going to get the merit of the object, because my choosing it has no merit at all. In fact, I'm choosing it based on real or imagined merit in the object. So that's where Augustine went wrong. Calvin just swallowed Augustine hook, line, and sinker. And therefore they're both maligning God. Because, honey, God ain't compromised by nothing. He didn't have to take away your free will due to the fact that you sin. In fact, free will is how your soul breathes, and free will indicates your dependence on other things, on food, on air, on breath. You have to choose all those things in order to go on living. Does that mean you're good because you choose something that you need to go on living? I don't think so. What I think it means then, is that the thing that's making you able to go on living and breathing is where the good is. See, so Augustine was just full of it. And so was Calvin, who didn't think his way out of a paper bag on that topic. So that's his second poison, is that he bought what Augustine bought by saying, well, if I can make a good choice, then I'm good. Yeah, you're taking credit for the good thing that you choose. If I buy a good computer, I'm not good for buying that computer. It's the computer that's good. That's why I believe in it. Duh. And, 500 years have gone by. So how come the Calvinists haven't figured out what Calvin went wrong here? That just baffles me. Okay, it really does. Of course, they also think God's incompetent when they cry that God has authored limited atonement. Really? What, God is not totally righteous? He doesn't deserve to be paid for all sin, whether people go to hell or not? Who cares if we go to hell? God should get paid. And if he gets paid, there's no obligation for him to use that money to save us. The money of Christ's thinking went and paid God, not us. And if God chose to paint the sky purple with the value of that thinking, that's his sovereign choice. So how come Calvinists, who are so big on sovereignty, deny God's sovereignty, A, by saying, oh, God had to take your free will away. He's not strong enough to have made your soul right in the first place. You know what I want to do with you guys? And then the second insult to God, oh, well, God's not competent in Christ and isn't loving enough to create unlimited atonement. Only some sins could be paid for, and somehow in hell, those who go there whose sins weren't paid for, they're somehow paying God anyway. Oh, really? Then why did Christ go to the cross, you jerks? Of course, he got that idea kind of from Augustine, too, not quite so much. There's always been this dispute among the stupid church fathers who couldn't think their way out of a theological paper bag, whether or not it was a waste. As if man meant anything, as if man were worth anything. Honey, we aren't worth anything even if we were perfect. Because the issue is infinite righteousness versus finite whatever you can do good. Whatever you can do good, honey, it ain't good enough. I don't care if you're perfect and never sinned. Christ's perfection was not used to pay for sins on the cross. It was the word in his head that was used to pay for sins on the cross. His perfection was just the place where the word had to reside. He had to stay perfect. It was like, well, the Greek word for it is skenos, a container. His perfection was just a container. It had no value, even perfect. A lamb that has no blemishes, that's just a container. You can't have a defiled container. But the container can't pay for anything. His perfection didn't pay for anything. It was the thinking in his head which paid for sins. That's Isaiah 53:11. I've said it many times. Bedato yatzdik in my American accent in Hebrew. So being perfect doesn't pay God for anything, doesn't do anything for God. It's not as good as God's perfection, because our perfection would be finite. Got that? So can you do good deeds? Can you do good? Can you want good? Sure you can. But the amount of good deeds you do, or the kind of good deeds you do, and any good that you do, even when we're all dead and in the eternal state, isn't as good as God's good. That's why Christ had to pay with his thinking. He had to have divine level thinking in his head to pay. So how come Calvin didn't figure that out? I can understand when he's in his 20s writing the Institutes, he's working it all out. It was a terrible time with all the candle wax, and it was really hard. It was a miracle that he even got what he got done. But by the time he's 50, he should have figured it out. I'm a brain out and I'm 57, and I figured this out decades ago, which is why I, said no to Calvinism. So how come Calvin didn't figure it out? I didn't use the Bible technology then. I just used common sense. Which, of course, the Bible is common sense. So how come Calvin didn't figure it out? So that's the other poison, is that he's denying free will because Augustine did it. He's denying God's competence at paying for sin. All right? And the fourth thing, and the one that kind of prompted this video, is that because Calvin did those first things, those first three poisons, anti-Semitism, the free will thing, and the limited atonement thing, although there's some question about whether he always held to unlimited atonement. His commentary, I think it's on John 2, or John 1:29, about Lamb taking away the sins of the world, sounds like it's an unlimited atonement. Like he finally came to that view. But let's pretend I'm wrong about that. If he still held to limited atonement, like most Calvinists do today, then that's a third poison. Yeah, third poison. The fourth poison is sort of the child of the first three. The fourth poison ends up turning faith into a work. You see, and this is something that Calvin, I've tried arguing with them and explaining this to them many times. They're not going to get it now either. But at least I'm going on record as saying it. If you deny that God can preserve free will even after the fall, and if you deny that faith is non-meritorious, that's the Bible. What the Bible says, it's non-meritorious, the merits in the object of faith, as I explained at the beginning of this video. If you deny that, then you are essentially turning faith into a work. Well, what did Paul say? And what is it? I'm not sure where it is off the top of my head, but the verse goes something like this: if it's not faith, then it's works. That the two are mutually exclusive. He might have said it in Romans and Galatians. Those two books are coming to my mind. Okay? It's either faith or works. If it's works, then it's no more grace. Okay? It is by grace you are saved, not works. Okay, that's Ephesians 2:8 and 9, which everybody knows, and the Calvinist twist the Greek too. but I've covered that in other videos. What I'm trying to focus on here is, if you say that faith is meritorious of itself, then you're turning faith into a work. Then there's no more grace. So all that stuff about the Calvinists shouting grace, 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 sovereign grace, first of all, they undercut sovereignty. Okay, when they say that God didn't keep his promises to the Jews, but he replaced them with church. Oh, the promises to Abraham are unconditional, if anybody would bother to read Genesis 12, 15, and 17. Okay, and then they're denuding God of his sovereignty by saying that Adam lost free will at his fall, especially since free will is how the soul breathes. Okay, and belief is the expression of that free will. You believe or you don't. That's your choice. Okay? And then thirdly, to say that it's limited atonement is also denuding God of his sovereignty and his competence. Alright? And of course his holiness and his love. So then faith becomes a work. If faith is meritorious, that glorifies man's faith. And the Calvinists will be busy saying, well, no, God had to give you the faith. That's their big, statement all the time. Okay, but if faith is meritorious, then it's a work. You got that? And that's the worst poison in many ways of all, because what I'm beginning to find out is that's what a lot of Christians think. I have faith. Oh, aren't I a good Christian? Honey, faith is bought by the faithfulness of the object you believe in. That's the very derivation of the Greek word. Pistis comes from pistas. Pistas means faithful, meaning God. And I have faith in God because God is faithful. My faith is a result of God's faithfulness. You have faith in something because of its merit. That's the stress of the word faith. It's not about you being good. That's just as bad as Augustine's mistake. When he said, oh, if I can choose a good thing, then I'm good. No, dummy. If you can choose a good thing, it means it's good. That's why you choose it. Totally backwards from reality. That's how arrogance thinks. Backwards. And that's Calvin's poison. It runs throughout the Institutes. It runs throughout his commentaries. And so it leads to the fifth poison of his, of which the fourth is an adjunct. Calvin was all about piety and works, all about how you behave. And Geneva was a terrible place to live. And it took him some years before he got control of it, but once he got control of it, everybody had these laws that they had to obey for their behavior. So that's like wearing the hijab all the time, only it was a Christian set of rules. The Jews were excluded from certain occupations. Yeah, just like they are in Islamic countries. In other words, Geneva was like an Islamic country, except it called itself Christian, and so it had Christian flavor rules. But it had all these behavioral rules about what you could and couldn't do on given days of the week, and whether or not you had to go to church. Yeah, as if behavior was true spirituality, which it's not. So that's the fifth poison. It's been infecting Christianity ever since. Oh, I'm so good because I believe and you don't. I have more faith than you do. That's not even what the word faith means in Greek. And that's not what it meant in Hebrew either. Because the Greek word has its provenance from the Hebrew use. And the Hebrew use of amen, okay, has to do with the object being so valuable and so trustworthy you believe. See, he's God, so believe him already. That's the basic idea behind the Hebrew amen, which ports over into the Bible's use of the Greek pistis. Because pistis didn't have a religious connotation of any kind, okay, prior to Christianity. the connotation of pistis was that there was this contract that was ironclad. It was pistos. It was dependable. And therefore you had pistis in it, because it was ironclad. It was stored in the temple, okay, for safekeeping. You could prove it, you could point to it, and you could have faith, therefore, in whatever the items were in the contract. It was all based on contract law. And if you don't believe me, look it up in Big Kittle. All right, I'm sure you can go to your local seminary, your local library, and find the 10-volume set of Big Kittle, and just look up pistis in it. And you'll find everything I just told you there, because that's why I can tell you what I'm telling you, is I have it on computer now. That's where I'm getting this from. I don't tell you anything that I didn't get from somewhere, because I want you to, be able to vet what I say. So everything I tell you, you can prove online somewhere. This time I can tell you the exact source, Big Kittle. All right? So to say that faith is a work, to say that, oh, I'm so good because I have faith, that totally cuts God out. That totally makes you your own God, that God owes you for your faith. That's totally the reverse of what the Bible's been saying. And the same thing for behavior, which is the fifth poison. And Calvin didn't start these poisons. He just really continued them into Protestantism. That your behavior, whether you're moral, whether you're nice, and do you know how much hypocrisy is in Christianity? I see it so often in the YouTube comments, it's not funny. There's always some hypocrite coming on one of my videos during the day with this, oh, brother this, oh, sister that, or, and they start out with this compliment to me like I'm supposed to fall for it, and then they dig in the knife. And I don't care if they dig in the knife or they compliment. I just ignore that and try to focus on the essence of what their argument is. But surely, in your day, you see a lot of Christian hypocrisy, don't you? It's been the norm for centuries. Oh, we sing songs and chant. Oh, we sing the Gregory chant. Oh, I'm a Christian. Oh, now, brother, your temple is the body of the Holy Spirit. You shouldn't do that. I mean, it's just oozing. The hypocrisy is oozing. I've gotten to the point where I don't even want to read the Bible in English anymore, because all the hypocrites use that language. I can only get away from it when I go to the original. Of course, if I was raised in Greece or Israel, I probably couldn't get away from it even then. See what I mean? Behavior. That was Calvin's legacy. His apostate legacy was behavior is a criterion of spirituality. Morality is a criterion of spirituality, which it's not. That faith is a work, and he gauged everybody by their piety. That's it's a frequent word in his writings. Piety, piety, piety. Blech. The most legalistic guy I've ever seen. Of course, I haven't read them all. Church fathers were pretty bad too. I mean, 1 Clement makes you want to get Pepto-Bismol after about 2.5 seconds of reading it. That guy was as hypocritical as they come. Writing the Corinthians in 96 AD, no wonder Revelation 17 was written at the same time. But, bad behavior, good behavior, oh, that's spiritual or not spiritual. Whether you say the right words and brother this and sister that, and whether you're nice all the time to people, yes, sticking the knife in at the same time. Yeah, that's how Satan talks in Genesis 3. Did God say that none of the trees in the garden are allowed? Satan was very nice. He's very nice to the Lord in Matthew 4. Oh, why do you have to go hungry? Command that these stones become bread. It's called the imperative of entreaty in Greek. Satan's nice. And that's what Calvin bought. Hook, line, and sinker. Nice behavior. Show up in church and dress properly and bow and scrape and do the movements and smile. Yeah. Poison, baby. Satan style. So those are the 5 poisons of Calvin, but they don't start with Calvin, and Calvin's not alone to blame. A, anti-Semitism. B, that free will was lost at the fall. Big lie. Okay? Free will is non-meritorious, and the merit's in the object, never the subject. You can choose something good because it is good. Your choosing it doesn't make you good. It might benefit you, but it doesn't make you good. The goodness is in the object, and it's arrogance to say you are good if you choose it. That's Augustine's, disgusting Augustine's arrogance, which Calvin just bought hook, line, and sinker. 3, okay, the idea that God's just not competent or holy enough to be able to pay for all sin. And that somehow man ends up paying for his own sin. Baloney. You're not good enough even if you're perfect, so you can't pay for squat. It has to be done to you by God. The work alone is by God. Even if you're perfect, God has to do all the work. You're breathing because he says so. That means he loves you, duh. So God's not only competent, okay, he's totally competent. And there isn't one sin he didn't get paid for. And what he does with that payment is his sovereign choice, okay? And he sovereignly chooses to apply it to us when we believe in him. That's particular redemption. It is not the same as atonement. Atonement is not redemption. Atonement is what Christ pays to God. Redemption is how God uses the money. Go look it up. So that's the 3rd poison. 4th poison, oh, I have faith, then I have to be blessed. I'm a good person because I have faith. No, you're not. You might be a happy person if you have faith. It's a benefit to you, not something you do that somebody should pay you for. Jackass. And 5th poison, your behavior. Oh, see, I'm holy because I'm wearing this towel. Actually, it's a doublet cover on my head. Yeah. Yeah, behavior. Oh, brother this, oh, sister that, oh, see how nice I'm being to you. And that means I'm holy because I'm being nice. Yeah, and it doesn't matter if I compromise the Bible. I'm just going to agree with you even though your attitudes and your interpretation of the Bible is totally wrong and you're totally insulting God. And I'm just going to be nice to you even if you mistranslate the Bible so that you cut Christ's head off. It only matters if I'm nice. That's Christian love. Yeah, and who cares about what the Bible says? Let's cut off God's head. Let's lie against the Bible in order to have Christian fellowship. Yeah. Fifth poison, baby. And I'm calling this Calvin's poison, but honey, as you can see, it's not only Calvin who's guilty. Ta-ta.